You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast.
Hello, this is Jo. This week we're back with Michelle and Terri, part 2. They spoke in late 2017, which is the episode that we released last week. So if you missed that one, be sure and go back to check it out. They spoke again this year in 2019. Michelle and Terri circle back on events from her past and look forward to what happened next and where Terri is today with her own healing. It's truly a heartfelt story, and it's easy to see Terri's heart is so pure. Her hard work has really paid off. Terri said 2019 will be the year of sharing love and light to any woman who loves someone suffering from addiction. I hope you feel her love and light today, and I hope you find positivity, bravery, forgiveness, and true healing in her personal story. When we love someone suffering from addiction, chaos is normal. The craziness, the unpredictability, the lack of stability, and even the anger and the outbursts. We get used to it. We start to think that it's normal. But it's not. It's not normal, and it's certainly not fair that you have all of this to deal with. Addiction can steal our happiness, and sometimes it's easy to forget that there are things that we can do today to take back our happiness from addiction. When we learn to take back our own happiness, we are crippling addiction. We're stopping it in its tracks because it no longer has that power over us. Are you ready to learn how? We've created a guide sheet for you. It's totally free, and in it you'll find 5 tools to take back your happiness. To get your free guide sheet, go to loveoveraddiction.com/happy135.
Let me start at the beginning. Can you walk us through how did you end up in a relationship with somebody who is suffering or struggling with addiction? Did you know right away? What were some of the warning signs? Start us off with the history of your relationship.
Okay. I did not have any knowledge of addiction, so it was I didn't know what the red flags were. I should have, because my mom is an adult child of alcoholics, and so she sheltered me from, we didn't have a lot of contact with her family, and now I know why. But he was a great guy, and he was not an addict when I met him. I think he had tendencies to be an addict, but he was not an alcoholic at the time.
Interesting. So what brought that on?
We moved away from family and friends, and then he also retired. And that's really, after a few years of retirement, is when the beers started opening at 8 in the morning. And there'd be days when he wouldn't even get out of his bathrobe.
Wow. So do you think it was a lack of purpose for him? Do you think it was all this extra time, or do you think it was depression from removing him from a healthy environment?
Well, we moved because he would get into many conflicts with people in the community where we lived. And the last one was the next door neighbor. So that was pretty much the last straw. So I thought, well, if we had talked about moving and we found a nice place to move to, and I thought, well, once we remove ourselves from that situation, everything will be fine. That's kind of wrong thinking.
Did he clearly would you say it would be fair to say he had issues with anger?
Yes. They were always directed at other people, not at me. And he also, after we had gotten married, was diagnosed with depression and went on antidepressant medication.
So he's a high conflict man, and you left. How did you feel about being removed from your environment? Were you relieved that this was a new beginning, or were you feeling resentful that you had to, pick up your life and leave your family and friends for his, inability to healthily process his anger?
I would say it was a little bit of both. I felt tremendous relief thinking, oh boy, nobody knows, nobody's going to have any conflicts with him where we move to. Nobody's going to know his past conflicts with people. It's still drivable to visit family and friends. And I thought this was a great thing. Although as you get older, it's a little harder to make friends with other couples or other people. So that was a bit of a hard thing. So I did start to then resent the fact that I had to move away from all my friends and social activities and that sort of stuff. So I hate to sound wishy-washy, but I did feel both feelings.
Yeah, you can feel both feelings. That's definitely okay. What about your children? Did you have children with him? Were there any kids involved?
Well, this was a second marriage, and our kids were adults when we made the move. My youngest son was around the most. He was still in high school when we got married. So, and then there's a stepson that was the same age as my youngest son, and he would come over like every other weekend. And then when we moved away, they were already out of high school, so that kind of stopped anyways.
Did any during their childhood, I know you said this was your second marriage, did they ever see your husband kind of, display his anger? Were they ever the cause of it or the recipient of it?
A little bit of his son. And I think that's what caused his son to stop coming around as he got older. And once he could make the decision and had friends and everything, he didn't come except for a couple times a year. But my son, he got along the best with my son. So I don't know if he ever did get angry towards him.
That's interesting. Okay, so he's retired. And he's clearly suffering from depression, can barely get out of bed, doesn't want to change into, clothing, stays in his pajamas. When did you start to feel like, okay, he's had too much to drink, this is now becoming an issue? Do you remember a moment? Do you remember there being an instance?
I remember two. The first one was, so I'm going to, full disclosure, I'm a really slow learner. So 2009, he got a DUI. Well, he didn't get a DUI. He had his best friend get a DUI in a boat. And I'm pretty sure he saw the sheriff boat coming, and then he took a leave, went downstairs, went underneath in the cubby and said to his friend, can you just sit here in the driver's seat? So that was the first one, and I kept thinking, wow, what are the odds of that? And then the second one was we went on a fad diet in 2011. And we had to give ourselves shots in our stomachs, and it was a 500-calorie diet a day, which I would never do again. But There was no alcohol, and it's only 40 days, which isn't that long. And he couldn't I think the first time we did it, he did maybe 4 days without any alcohol. And then he started to just drink little shots of vodka. And then the second time we did it, he didn't even try to stop. So,
got it. So those were both warning signs to you that there's a bigger issue going on.
yes. And right around that time, he also went to a pain clinic and started on his, oops, sorry, that's my dog, started on combination Vicodin and methadone.
Wow.
Plus his drinking. So that was a mess.
That sounds like a mess. That sounds like a disaster. So,
but I also thought, well, better or worse, I need to be here for him during his worst.
Okay, I want to park there for a moment. But before I do, I want to go back to something you said earlier when you said you were a slow learner, because I think a lot of women feel that way, where they kind of like look in hindsight and say, how come it took me so long to see the writing on the wall, to see the obvious? Yes. But I think that's a very unfair, judgmental statement that we make to ourselves, because particularly with you, I mean, you were happily married for a very long time before this even started to be an issue, and you were not raised in a household with drinking going on, and so with an alcoholic or an addict. So it takes us a long time to figure out, to allow ourselves to stop making excuses for our loved ones, to rationalize the fact that stop rationalizing and to start saying, oh, this could be the truth. And it's a hard thing to do. So I don't think you're a slow learner at all. I think it does take most of us a super, super long time to come to that conclusion. And they do a really good job of talking us out of it, of convincing us they don't have a problem.
That's so true.
Yeah. So let's go back to better or worse. Okay, because this is also really common. So what do you mean when you say, he was on all of this prescription drugs plus drinking, and you felt like you had to stick by him because of your marriage vows? Can you talk about that and share, what do you mean by that? Did you feel guilty for the idea of entertaining leaving, or did you not want to leave and you were kind of using your marriage vows as a way to convince yourself that shouldn't even be something you should entertain?
I think well, I shouldn't say I think. It was because this was my second marriage. And I really felt it was important to give it my all. And I just didn't want to abandon him. He was really, I knew he was sick. And he just wasn't getting any better even with modern medicine. And even the doctor was telling him, you're going to die unless you stop drinking. And it doesn't work if you're on the antidepressant and alcohol and narcotics. But he wouldn't listen. So I'm like, everybody else pretty much had abandoned him. His family wasn't coming around, and he really only had one friend left that would still be in contact with him. So I just felt like if I left, then he would probably not want to be here.
You mean he took his own life?
And I didn't want that responsibility.
Did he ever threaten to take his own life?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very common too. Very common. So if you could go back in time and you could tell knowing everything that you know now, and you could say, you could go back in time and give yourself advice in that moment, in that time of your life, what would you say to yourself? Would you have done anything differently?
I would have done something different. I would have stood up for myself and basically tell him, you've got this much time to get yourself help or I'm out. I would have done that much earlier. I don't know if the results would have been any different.
Right.
But I think because he would always try and convince me that he could stop at any time, and I knew that was a lie. And I would have just said, okay, prove it. And he,
right.
That would have started this many years earlier.
Yeah. Okay, so that's really good to know. So he was sort of manipulating you with this and trying to control you and trying to keep you trapped by threatening to, take his life and, continue this destructive behavior, which I'm sure was just a super scary place to be. I can't even, I can't imagine. I say I can't imagine. I can't imagine that. I know that
You've been there.
I've been there. So, okay, so tell me what happened next. What did you do? When did you decide that enough was enough, or did you decide that?
It wasn't going anywhere, and I was getting physically ill. So I started to take care of myself. I ended up in urgent care, all kinds of stomach issues, and just I couldn't sleep and all these different things. And I'm like, this is crazy. I was so worried about him that I never even thought about taking care of myself. So it really did come into where it affected me and my health. And he, of course, couldn't drive me to the urgent care. So that was another thing where it's like, okay, somebody's got to drive me. And we're away from everybody, so it's not like somebody could drive 3 hours to come take me to a hospital or the urgent care. So that was a big turning point. And then I joined Al-Anon, and then I found your old program, the Confident Wife. Is that now Love Over Boundaries?
It's Love Over Mistakes, yes.
Love Over Mistakes, yes.
Yes.
And just hearing that somebody else had gone through it. And I do love Al-Anon, but it's there's really not a lot of practical advice. So your program just actually had real things to do, like setting up a boundary. Oh, my gosh, what is that? So,
it's so true.
So
we don't
once
know
I
what
started
that is.
doing that. No.
No.
You hear the word in Al-Anon, but nobody really explains what it is, how you set it up, and that it's perfectly normal to have them. That was the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so normal. And most people do have them. Like most people get that skill at a very young age. But for some reason it takes us, like you said, a little bit longer to arrive there, but they're one of the healthiest things we can do for ourselves. So here you are, you're in the urgent care. You've realized that his behavior has caused you to be in a position not only where you're physically hurting, but you're isolated. You're completely dependent on this man to get you back home, and that's got to feel like somewhat of a bottom, like a rock bottom for you. That's got to feel somewhat of like the wake up call. Was that what you would call it?
You'd think that would be my bottom.
I love your honesty.
It was kind of that little glimmer, and that's when I actually started to listen to that little voice in my gut. And I think it's like, okay, how ironic is that? You're having issues with your stomach, And that's when you start to listen to that inner voice. So
I love that. That's terrific. You started listening to yourself. And you know what? It might not have been your rock bottom, but it was like, I often think back, the decision to leave, usually it feels like it's one moment, but it's actually the, many moments have occurred to result in that one moment when you make the decision. Did you have a moment, Terri, when you were like, okay, I gotta go. This has to end. Or what did you do? How did you handle leaving?
Oh gosh. I gave myself time to prepare and got a storage unit and took out items. I met with I had a very understanding attorney who dealt with alcoholics her whole life. So as far as that goes, she was very great at giving advice at the beginning.
That's wonderful.
Get a storage unit, remove items of value that are valuable to you. Open your own account at the bank, and I did that. However, I did post on the secret Facebook group to warn women to not open it in the same bank that you have all your other accounts, because I ended up with a financial restraining order, and it froze all the accounts, our joint and my separate. So it's okay to have two banks. How did you end up
with first of all, super wise advice. I remember you sharing that, and I thought it was fantastic. Tell me about, what do you mean by you got a financial restraining order? You received one. How did that happen?
Well, when I had finally left, and the bottom was just out of control, he was taking the safe deposit box key. He was going to go and take everything out of value that was at the bank, and so I just said, that's it. And then he calmed down. He couldn't find the key. I found it and just put it in my pocket for the next day, because it was Labor Day, and I just wanted to go there and just take out my items and just leave his there, but I was going to go and get my own separate safe deposit box. So I'm sorry, I just looked outside and saw the beautiful snow, and I got sidetracked. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. That comes with age. I'm noticing. I'm like, oh my gosh, where did that thought even go? I get it. So you were saying this wonderful story about how you grabbed the key and kept it in your pocket for a couple days, planning to just go remove your items from the safe deposit box.
Yeah. So I did that, and I opened up my own separate safe deposit box, and I just was very cautious. And we had been on a trip with his family, and they had all just said, we're done with him, everything, so you need to leave him, which that was not why I left him. I didn't want to share with them that I was going to leave. So, so I got all the information and everything out, and then it took me about 6 months before I could finally leave, because I didn't want to.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure I understood. Did you take out the financial restraining order, or did he take out the financial restraining order on your
It
account?
was a mutual decision that my attorney brought to the judge after he went to the bank. When I left, the day after I left, he went to the bank and withdrew almost all the money from all the accounts that he had access to.
Wow.
So I brought the paperwork to the bank, and they just put a lock on all the accounts.
Which was good in a way, but also to your point of your wonderful advice to all the women out there, don't use the same institution because it's all your accounts. So I see that makes total sense. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you found an attorney who is familiar with addiction and the tricks that it plays and all of the common traits, because that's such an advantage, I think, when you're dealing with somebody who's very familiar with the truth of addiction. So well done. So what did you do? Did you move out or did he move out?
I moved, and I did not feel safe or comfortable telling him to his face I was leaving. I knew better. He was kind of, this is going to sound so horrible, but he also was kind of a gun fanatic, and he would leave loaded guns throughout the house in case anybody tried to break in. That's the fear that I had the last few months before I left, and why I took the time that I had to take, because I was scared. So I left, and I left and I went to my parents and stayed with them for a few weeks.
I am so glad and grateful that you shared that, because I think so many women think, oh, it could never happen to me, he loves me, he would never harm me or hurt me, and they think that they're being dramatic or unreasonable or whatever by taking necessary precautions to protect their physical well-being. But I have heard, doing this for as many years as I've been doing, so many stories where women, have been threatened, or, there's been violence, or there's been weapons involved. And so I'm so proud of you for really thinking through this process and taking that time to come up with a plan. So during those 6 months, you clearly were doing the work. You were deciding, you were organizing your finances. You were figuring out where you needed to leave, what you needed to do to leave. You were figuring out where you should stay. Are there any other helpful tips that you can share that you did during those 6 months of planning?
Make sure that you have in your phone emergency contacts. If something did go south, I knew I could call certain neighbors, and I was lucky enough to live in an area where there were a lot of law enforcement people, and I had just talked to them in private, and they totally understood, and they said, here's my private number. You give me a call if there's anything that happens, or you need somebody to come up immediately before the sheriff's office can come. So I would say that's a huge thing. Safe words. So when your friends or your family did call you, you could just say a word and they knew you were still okay. That helped a lot too. That helped my friends and my family to know that everything was still on plan and I was okay.
Okay, so I just am sitting here saying, I absolutely love this. This is such good advice. You had the courage to tell your friends and family, that was part of your process of leaving, right? I mean, in order to tell them, you had to be very honest with them and upfront about what was really going on. How did that feel, and what was the response?
It was the hardest thing for me, because then I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm such a failure. They're not going to know what I've been through. They already knew he was an alcoholic and an addict. My parents already knew, my kids already knew, my friends knew, so it wasn't a surprise to them. So it was such a relief, and it was like the first time that I felt, oh my gosh, this is okay for me to leave. Everybody knows. Nobody said you've got to leave, but they were just so supportive. And this disease does crazy things to us, because I kept thinking nobody's going to know that he's an alcoholic or an addict. Everybody knew.
Right. Right. And I think it also does a really good job of telling us that it's somehow our fault. So when we feel like we, like, quote, confess to other people what's going on, that they're going to place judgment on us. And I don't know about you, but that was the farthest thing that I experienced. I experienced a level of, like, empathy and compassion that I had never in my life experienced. They were so accepting and so loving and warm and asking, what can we do to help?
You know what I got a lot of too is they felt relief that I could finally see what they had seen.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
So
that's good stuff. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you decided to leave. You created all of these wonderful plans. How did he take it?
Oh, not well.
Yeah.
Not well. He destroyed the house. He just, well, he went to detox before he was served, thinking that he could win me back by going to detox. I have security cameras. I had to have security cameras. I had an alarm system because I was, like I said, I was kind of scared. So he wanted the alarm company too. So he's telling me that he checked out of detox on day 4, and he said it was more like a psychiatric hospital than it was alcohol detox. And he said, but he's sober. So as he's telling me this, I'm looking online, and I could see the camera in the family room. And he said, I'm not drinking any beer, which wasn't a lie. He was downing a bottle of red wine at 7:30 in the morning. So I had him served the next day, and then the day after that, his son came up to visit him. And once the son got up here, he overdosed and had to go by ambulance to the hospital.
Your current husband overdosed, not the son, right?
Not the son, the husband, the alcoholic addict. Yes.
Yeah.
But he waited until his son was here, if that makes sense. So I don't really think he wanted. I think it was a cry for help. It wasn't. He wasn't trying to kill himself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was okay. And so what did you do when you heard that he had overdosed?
Well, his son called me 2 days after that happened, because he said it wouldn't do me any good. It wouldn't be good for me to go back. And I just thought that was the nicest thing he could have done.
What a terrific man for saying that.
Yeah. So I didn't go. I went home the next day to grab more clothes and things like that because I knew he was in the hospital for real on a psychiatric hold, suicide watch. So I went home and got some more clothes and things, and that's when I saw the damage that he had done to the house and just said, okay, one day at a time, I'm leaving, and I don't know what's going to happen. But that's when he went to rehab after he got out of the hospital.
I see. And what did you feel when you heard he was going to rehab? Was there a part of you that was like, oh, he's getting better, maybe this will work out? Or was it where you were thinking the more distance you got, the more it confirmed your decision that this was the right thing to do?
It confirmed my decision, and I never wavered. I had told him once I had finally talked to him after I left, I said, you got to be sober, and it's got to be 12 months of sobriety before we even think about getting back together.
That's terrific.
Because the hardest part is you still love these men. Mm-hmm. It's not like you can turn your heart off and all of a sudden you're like, nope, no love anymore. So I was very happy that he decided to finally get some help, but I just knew him well enough that I'm like, there's no way, not doing anything, not living together for one full year. And, of course, he didn't like that boundary at all. But I had to do that for myself.
Was it difficult at times? Were there nights where you were lonely and you wanted to pick up the phone and just call him, or did it get easier with time?
It got easier with time. He never stopped calling, and I tried to set up, I did. I said to him, look, let's just talk once a week. You don't need to call me 3 times a day. And he didn't respect that, so I ended up just having to let his calls go to voicemail. And that was a tough one. But he also didn't stay sober going to rehabs. He went twice, and neither time did he stay sober. And then when he got out the last time, the harassment really started because I was living in the home, and I'd gotten, the judge said, yes, you can have the house, and, till everything's settled. And so that's when I put up security cameras outside, because he was coming around and calling and taking things without permission, stealing mail, and threatening me that he was going to harm me. So I ended up having to get a restraining order.
So you kept in contact with your lawyer and documented all of this and continued to present that information and that evidence to your lawyer, who then I'm sure shared it with the judge or with his attorney. Is that correct?
Yes, she tried to talk to his attorney, and say, look, he needs to leave her alone. Nothing would get done, so she just said, get your paperwork, go down to the courthouse, and get it today. So I presented all this information, and I didn't know if it was going to happen or not, and they're like, oh, yeah, here's a restraining order. And it was extended for a full year.
That's terrific. Isn't that, I had to get a restraining order too. And I think it's so interesting that we go in there and think, I don't know if this is enough to qualify for harassment or, to qualify. It can't be that bad, and then the person looks at you like, are you kidding? This is absolutely everything you need to, legally get this person away from you. I think it's so interesting in hindsight how much we doubt ourselves and doubt our feelings and our fear, but like you said, it's so wonderful that your internal voice that you talked about earlier was probably so loud at that point that it was like you were just convicted to do the right thing for you, to stick up for you.
Yeah, it was time. I had to do something. And I know restraining orders, they're not going to stop anybody from doing what they want to do, but it was just the first step to protect myself. And if anything did happen to me, that they would know where to look.
Yep. I think it's such a symbol. It's a symbol of the strength and the courage behind the woman, because you're right. It's a piece of paper, and it's not, it's not true protection, but it does send a message saying, we are going to take their steps to stand up for ourselves. We're not going to put up with this any longer. So I love that you did that. Yeah. So tell me about, you got back into the house. The judge granted you the house. You were very smart by putting up cameras, but the harassment was at an all-time high. What happened next?
What happened next? We finally got to court. No. I wished he would have stopped bothering me. And that was my weakness, too, because he did continue with the phone calls. I took the step to block the calls. So that way I still had documentation that he would call, but he wouldn't be able to get through.
That's terrific.
Yeah. So, and then I would see him driving around the neighborhood, and he was an hour away, living an hour away. So that was the reason I got the cameras, because you wouldn't normally see somebody driving down the street close to where I live, unless they live there or they're going someplace around there. It's not convenient. There's nothing around there that you'd have to go to if you lived an hour away.
Right.
So, yeah. And then we did court and started to do the settlements and everything, and harassment continued. And there were times when I would just pack up my dogs and leave the area just to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see how you would just be on pins and needles, very anxious. How did you manage to get through that period? How did you manage to how did you eventually manage to sleep well at night, or did you not?
Well, he started to get worse, so I knew he wasn't in the car, especially at night anymore, because he was back to drinking and back on pain pills. So I knew that there was no way he would be driving in the dark over hills and passes to get to where I was. So that realization finally set in. Plus, I think it took me about 2 months after I'd had the security cameras, and I would sit in bed and check the cameras to see what was going on. And then I realized, you know what? He's so far in his disease again that I'm okay. Daytime is when I have to worry. So,
okay, so he was, acting up at night. You were worried during the day. What happened after that?
Well, then he was in and out of the hospital. Like 12 times in 2 weeks, going by ambulance and things like that, just because of, he would always use different excuses, but it was because of his drinking. So I wasn't privy to all of those calls, but a lot of those calls, his son or people who lived in that neighborhood where he was living would call and let me know. And then I would contact his son and sister to say, hey, this is what's going on. So yeah, then he seemed to, I guess, maybe get a little better, but the contact was less, so that was good for me. He stopped trying to call as often. The last time he tried to call was last Memorial Day at 5 a.m.
Really?
So, yeah.
And then I know that something, and I'm going to let you reveal what happened to him, but can you talk about that and when the time frame of that?
Well, let's see. I hadn't talked to him at all. I'm not answering any phone calls or anything. I got a phone call on a Monday night in June from a friend of his that lived across the street from him, and said he's been shot. The police and ambulance are on their way, but he's been shot, and they're going to take him to the hospital. And I said, is he talking? That was my thing. It's like, is he talking? And he said, no, he's not, but his eyes are open. Somebody shot him. He didn't do it himself. So I called a couple of neighbors, and they drove me up to the hospital. That was the only time I felt like this wasn't something that it was his. He wasn't going there because of his drinking. This was worse. So I thought I wanted to be there when he woke up, just to let him know that I still cared about him, but not because of the drinking. So I don't know if that makes sense. My whole warped thinking.
Total sense. No, I don't think that's warped thinking at all. I think that's healthy thinking. That's kind and compassion thinking. That's forgiveness. is what that is. You can't get there without forgiveness. So he was shot, and you got your neighbors to take you to the hospital. What did you see, or what did you feel when you arrived at the hospital?
Well, it was empty. It was late at night, and nothing was really going on. I was not on his contact list, but I don't think that he even, I don't know, I don't think he came in and they were doing CPR, so I don't believe that he ever gave them any contact list. And I was very honest and said, I am his ex-wife. And I just waited. We all just waited. And then a couple hours later, the nurse came out and said, yeah, we'd like to talk to you. Can we get you into another room? I said, well, there's nobody here. You can just tell me now. And I didn't put two and two together. He took us into a little room, and he said he succumbed to his injuries. He'd been shot 6 times. And that I just froze. I didn't know. I felt like I was just in a dream because it just didn't feel real. This larger than life, big guy, it just didn't seem real. And I had called his son to let him know I was on the way to the hospital and what had happened. And his son said, he couldn't take off work or he couldn't get there. He was an hour and a half away. And then I texted his sister, and his sister thought it might have been self-inflicted. I said no. So the neighbor was nice enough to call and let them know what had happened, because I after I felt like I was in this dream, I couldn't do anything. I just couldn't stop crying. So the neighbor called and told his son and sister what had happened.
Were you still in the room when you were crying? Were you in that small room, or had you had it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was just unreal. It's like this happens to other people. This is like a Dateline NBC thing, not my life. Mm-hmm. But he passed and stayed in the room for a bit, and then the neighbors drove me back home, and I don't think I slept much. I don't think I slept at all that night.
Mm-hmm.
And
what was going through your mind? What were you feeling? Or were you feeling anything?
I was feeling, gosh, what if I hadn't have done this? What if I had not had that year boundary? Would that have stopped anything? Would that have changed anything? What could I have done different? And I'm like, wait a minute. The next morning after I'd, been thinking about all these things, I'm like, why am I trying to make this my fault? I wasn't there. I did not get in an argument with somebody who had a gun. So
that's what happened? He was shot because he got into an argument with somebody?
Yes. And, they still haven't found the person who did that. So I don't have a lot of information on that. So
you were saying you were your initial instinct, your knee-jerk reaction was to place blame on yourself, but because you've done so much work and you're so much healthier, you were able to separate that and say that's not accurate decision. That's not accurate thinking. And so you reframed it and you removed yourself from the blame and from the guilt and from the narrative. How do you feel about it now? How long has it been?
It's been almost 7 months.
What goes through your mind now?
I feel really sad that this disease took him, because I am going to put the disease right in the crosshairs of the blame. If he was sober, he would not have gotten into an argument. So I know that is the reason that he is no longer here on this earth, is because of his addiction. I'm also thinking, well, I know he's sober now. Kind of, it doesn't really help, but it's like he doesn't have to suffer with this disease anymore. And then I just had to work on me, and just continue my work, because I don't think like I said before, it's like, this doesn't feel like something that, if you have a crystal ball, this would never have been anything that I would have thought would have happened to him.
Right, like this man that you fell in love with, that you married, didn't even have this issue until he was retired. I mean, that's yeah. So how is your life today?
It finally feels like it's my life. There were issues. I was excluded from doing a memorial service for him by his mom and sister. So that was really difficult. It wasn't so much that they didn't invite me. It was like I was purposely excluded.
Wow, that's sad.
And they never contacted me again. His sister was trying to get a hold of being in charge of his money, but he hadn't changed his will or his trust. So everything was going to go to his son. There was no issue. Nobody was fighting. I wasn't trying to get anything. I knew it was all going to go to his son, because that's how he always wanted it to go. But his sister, once she started to get upset with me, because she wanted to be in control of his money, and she couldn't do it. So then she just stopped talking to me. And so 2018 is over, and everything is done. His son now has everything that he's supposed to have, and I can move on. And this year I'm just going to continue my growth, because it's you don't just get over this quickly.
Yeah.
So
I can't even imagine, because it wasn't just the death of your ex-husband. You lost these relationships with his sister, and and the mother, and I can see how painful that would be, but I can also see how healthy that can be for you, and that can be a gift for you, because you are able to start 2019 with such a clean slate. There's no trails of addiction following you at all. It was just a very dramatic and really painful situation, but I can see where that could be purposeful, where that could be healthy for you in a way. Do you feel like there's any, I know a lot of women that are listening to this are really, really scared of losing their loved one if they leave. They're scared of the blame that they would put on themselves if they chose them over, their marriage or their relationship. What would you say to them? Like, their kind of worst nightmare happened to you, and all of it, and the in-laws that don't like you, and the tragedy of it all. But I know you, Terri, and I know that you are incredibly strong, and you are in a very healthy place. So what would you say to them right now that are listening and going, okay, that's it, I've got to stay because I couldn't handle this?
You can't save anybody from this disease unless they want to be saved. And you can't lower your guard just because they're starting to tell you that they're healthier, they're going to get healthy. Everybody who is involved with this disease, we all know that they lie. It causes people to lie. It causes people to manipulate and to hide. We all know that. And so you really have to trust your inner voice, your gut, and don't let somebody control your feelings. Don't be manipulated. I mean, I'm really glad that I had set that year boundary. I'm really sorry that he couldn't even do more than 30 days sober. But that's not my fault. A lot of people seem, if they leave, their loved ones finally do get healthy and sober. So just, my mom tells me this all the time, put on your big girl pants and just deal with it.
I like your mom. I say that to my kids too. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, because there is a part of us that needs to there is a maturity, I think, that happens when we take responsibility and accountability for our life, for our own happiness. We give back what doesn't belong to us, which is other people's lives and other people's choices, and instead really, really just focus on being responsible for ourselves. And I think that's when you put your big girl pants on. So thank you so much for sharing this. You've been a light, and you have been so helpful. And I know I've said this to you before, but I am so incredibly proud of you. I am so grateful to have met you, and I think you did everything absolutely perfectly. And I think 2019 is going to be your best year yet. I know I think one of the most encouraging things about your story is that it is never too late. I know we have a lot of young ones in our community that are in their 30s, but it is never too late to get that life that your inner voice is telling you you deserve, that you could have. And I know that you have just taken all of these wonderful steps in order to be able to receive it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you're going to be enjoying your future.
Yeah, I really do owe you so much, because your programs, like I said before, is so different from Al-Anon. And Al-Anon's great, but just to have real practical advice. And I really owe you such gratitude for your programs. And I know that it's because you had to go through a lot in your life to get to where you are. And that example to share with everybody in this community that we're not alone. So by putting sunlight to these horrible things that we've had to deal with, it really, we really are going to be a powerful force for women in the future to help so that they don't end up having to deal with what we both have had to deal with. That's
Absolutely.
My goal. That's what 2019 is going to be about. Got to help people so that they don't end up having to do what we did.
Absolutely. I love that. And your story is going to do exactly that. I know that you have just helped so many women, and I'm so grateful that you had the courage to share, because you're right, Terri, we've got to talk about this. The more of us that actually share what works, and that we don't have to stay stuck, and we don't have to be miserable for the rest of our lives, and that if we're just willing to do practical things, it sounds really scary, but it's simple and it has great results. So I adore you, and I want to talk to you again very soon, okay?
Sounds wonderful. And I just thank you so much for everything you do, and I just love you so much.
I love you too,
I'm going to wish you the best year of 2019, and thank you for what you do for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
When our loved ones suffer from addiction, so often the focus is on them. We find ourselves worrying, researching, checking or tracking their behaviors and habits. It's so easy to get wrapped up in that pattern, and we can start to feel locked in, like we just can't break the cycle. But we have a different idea for you. We have a different way, and it will help break the cycle. It will improve your life, your happiness, and your relationship. How does that sound? Inside our Love Over Addiction program, Michelle teaches from years of research, combined with her own personal experience on how to break this cycle and make real strides in your own recovery. And not only did it work for Michelle, but it's also worked for thousands of other women who have gone through the program. Here's what one woman had to say about the Love Over Addiction program. The secret Facebook group alone is worth the price of the program. Just not feeling so alone has been extremely valuable. The program itself is extremely helpful. Even when the lessons seemed a little elementary or obvious, like self-care, I realized that I wasn't practicing them. So hearing someone else give me permission to work on myself was invaluable. While we know the program works, we never want you to feel pressure to buy from us. We trust that when the timing is right for you, you'll know that too, and you'll dive right in. When you're ready to learn more about the Love Over Addiction program and how it can help you today, go to loveoveraddiction.com/LOA. Let's all take a moment together to honor not only Terri and all she has to offer, but also the loss of her loved one who was taken by addiction. Terri, if you're listening right now, I hope you feel a sense of love and support from the thousands of women listening to your story. Truly, we admire your hard work, we admire your honesty, and we look forward to hearing from you again and hearing what all 2019 brings to you. If you find yourself listening to this podcast and you want to help share this love and light, then we ask that you please review and rate us on iTunes. It helps other women find us, and then they can find the answers and support they're looking for. You don't ever have to use your real first name if you leave a review, so it can be completely anonymous. And full disclosure, leaving a review on iTunes can be a little bit tricky, so if you find yourself getting hung up, please head over to loveoveraddiction.com/review, and there you'll find full instructions with helpful screenshots. And thank you. Seriously, it means the world to us. Tune in next week to hear Michelle tell a personal story about how to find peace and calm in a completely chaotic environment. Talk to you then. Bye.